The other thing that you brought up is licenses, and not just in relation to AI. Like 2023, we also saw some small bumps in the road in a way, like HashiCorp changing their license from open source to business source. And I think there was another license, functional source, that came out last year too.
Mhm.
And I I always get a little upset when these things happen because it feels like, in a lot of cases, it feels like a hiccup in a company's strategy. But when they change license from open source to semi or fully closed, then it also reflects back to the whole open source ecosystem.
Mhm.
And like the HashiCorp change, that was a big buzz. At least that's how I experienced it. It was significant news.
Mhm.
And it feels a little unfair in a way to a lot of communities who are working tirelessly, and companies who figured out a way that they made open source work both for themselves as well as the communities where they are active in. And it just feels unfair when someone throws a huge rock into into the pond, because they're also reflecting on everybody else's work. And I'm a little uncertain in terms of where 2024 will take us in terms of licenses, like whether we will focus more on AI anyway, and that will distract a little bit from the license challenges, or whether we will see some either more licenses popping up, which I'm most certainly hoping that it's not going to happen because we already have way too many licenses.
Yep.
Um, but at the same time, like, will we see more of that? Will we see less of that? So I'm still kind of wondering where that's going to go. Do you have any view on that?
I see both sides of the argument with regard to the licensing and the monetization of value brought forth by an organization, in the sense that, I can understand the frustration that must be felt by companies like HashiCorp, or Elastic, or whomever, where they're the ones that are putting forward the time, the energy, the money, the resources to create something that is of value. Um, and it must be incredibly frustrating to watch another organization, a hyperscaler or whomever, take that original work and be able to monetize it substantially more successfully than the original author of the code. Um, I can understand that frustration, but at the same time, it's also what happens all over the place in the business world. And that's why you create value where you can protect it. I can give many examples, both of large companies who enable small companies who, uh, where most of the value is coming from the large company, but it's actually being usurped by the small company. And in the case of these organizations such as HashiCorp, I can understand them being frustrated that another organization is putting forward more value. But if you recognize that those hyperscalers actually are providing value, they're providing support, they're providing an entire integration ecosystem that just works for their customer. And so it's not just the technology that is being provided by the hyperscaler, it's an entire ecosystem that makes it easy to deploy, to create and deploy something in the cloud. And that's what the customers are buying, not that specific technology. So while I understand the frustration, it's not something that hasn't been happening all over the place. And I do have a problem with the bait and switch. If you wanted to go out with a business source license, you should have done it from the beginning. And yes, if your product didn't have proper uptake because it wasn't open source, then then it didn't have enough value to be there in the first place. But creating value or creating creating an ecosystem for your application based on one license and one set of expectations for usage, and then changing that midstream, that is not an integrity play. That is not standing by what you originally set out to do. Like I said, I can see both sides of that argument, but I end up falling on the side of, I hope in 2024 that anytime some organization tries to do a bait and switch on a license change, that a substantial and proper and successful fork occurs, and that others in the community pick that up for that given technology and move forward with it, or it dies on the vine, both from a commercial standpoint and an open source standpoint. And there's some other alternative in the open source world that fits the need just as well. So, yeah, I know that's kind of harsh. It's not great for startups, but it's also, again, find where there's value to your customer and then drive that, as opposed to it, trying to trick your customers into becoming customers in the beginning. That just doesn't sit well.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's harsh reality, I think that this podcast and all conversations really have the value when we are able to put out the harsh truth as well, and not trying to cover it with makeup and band-aids and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And we also did see the forks happen
Mm-hmm.
last year as well. And obviously, time will tell how successful those forks will be, whether they will be sustainable or not. We don't know that yet because they are still fairly new. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, you can definitely see that even with the bait and switch model, like you can't take something away from the ecosystem if the ecosystem wants and needs it, because you can fork
Yep. They will
and
find a way. Exactly.
they will find a way. And I'm also hoping that at one point this will also be a more common understanding that the ecosystem will find a way that just kind of drives companies away from this method. Because if they do have the understanding that they can't monetize on that ecosystem that they created, because the ecosystem will just walk away because they can, then they might not want to use that model anymore because it's not that beneficial. Like, it's one thing that you change the license, but it's also reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Yeah, you won't
like
get another you won't get another community. You you won't start something in open source and get another community. No.
Yeah, most certainly not. And I mean, like, I said that it's unfair to the open source ecosystem because it's the reputation of the open source ecosystem as well. And I stand by that. But at the same time, it's also the reputation of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was a customer or partner of a company who does something like this, I would rethink the partnership
Yep.
and, my work with that company, because if they do it in one place, then they might do it elsewhere too. So, the contracts can be very well written, but there's always a backdoor, there's always a finer print. So, just like the level of trust just drops all over, I think.
Yeah.
At
Well, I
least
mean,
it would for
it's just that a customer or partner has to be cognizant of the fact that that's probably the way it's going to end up. Right. So if that partnership and that value of that software or whatever the deliverable is of value in the commercial aspect, then that's fine. Just like, again, these companies aren't losing the customers that were already paying for it. Because those customers found value from those technology providers for that given widget. And, they didn't lose those people. Right. It's just that if you're trying to gain significant popularity and a critical mass of users, as well as the feedback and the positive marketing that happens through word of mouth in a community, that you can't expect to get again. That lightning is not going to strike twice. And you've burnt the bridge. So just, like I said, you can always create technology that's worth it to people to pay for, and that's great. And that would be the way that hopefully you expect to go on forward because it's not going to be any other way.